Under the scorching sun, a group of elite Navy SEALs gathered on the dusty training field, their boots kicking up clouds of sand as they moved into formation. The air was thick with the smell of sweat, gun oil, and determination, a place where only the strongest survived. Among them stood Commander Jack Reynolds, a hardened officer known for his sharp tongue and even sharper shooting skills. He had spent years building his reputation as one of the best marksmen in the military, a man whose word carried weight and whose approval was hard-earned. Today was supposed to be a simple demonstration of skill for the younger recruits, a routine exercise meant to separate the capable from the exceptional. But standing a few feet away from the group was a woman who didn't belong there, or at least that's what everyone thought. Her name was Emily Carter, a quiet, unassuming woman from a small rural town. She wasn't dressed like a soldier or anyone trained for war. She wore a simple faded shirt tucked into worn jeans, her boots more suited for farm work than combat. Her brown hair was tied back in a loose ponytail, and there was nothing about her at first glance that hinted at danger or skill. She looked like someone who might bake pies for a county fair rather than handle a weapon. The SEALs eyed her with a mix of confusion and amusement, whispering among themselves, wondering why she was even there. Jack crossed his arms and smirked, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear as he addressed the situation. "All right, gentlemen, looks like we've got ourselves a spectator today," he said, nodding toward Emily. "Apparently, someone thought it'd be a good idea to let a civilian try her hand at our course. I don't know who approved this nonsense, but let's get this over with so we can get back to real training." The men laughed, a ripple of mockery passing through the group, but Emily's face remained calm, unreadable. She didn't flinch at the laughter or the condescension. Instead, she kept her eyes on the range ahead, scanning the targets set up at varying distances. Some were stationary, others programmed to move unpredictably, mimicking real combat situations. She studied the course quietly, like someone memorizing a pattern, while Jack continued to taunt her. "Tell me something, ma'am," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Have you ever even fired a rifle before? These aren't toys you find at a county fair. This is real precision shooting, the kind that takes years of training. Hitting even one of those moving targets is tough for the best of us. No one hits them all. Hell, I've been doing this for 15 years and even I can't pull that off. You know why?" He paused for effect, letting his words sink in. "Because it's impossible. No one can hit that." The final statement hung in the air like a challenge, drawing murmurs of agreement from the SEALs. Emily finally turned her head and met Jack's gaze. Her eyes were calm but sharp, carrying a quiet intensity that made him falter for half a second. Then she spoke, her voice soft but steady. "Maybe no one you know," she said simply. The murmurs grew louder, this time mixed with disbelief. Jack raised an eyebrow, his smirk widening into a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Is that so? All right then, show us. Prove me wrong. But here's the deal. You miss even one shot, you walk away, and we never waste our time like this again." "Agreed." Emily didn't hesitate. "Agreed," she said. A junior officer handed her a standard-issue rifle, expecting her to fumble with it, but to everyone's surprise she handled the weapon with quiet efficiency. She checked the magazine, adjusted the sights, and positioned herself with the ease of someone who had done this many times before. The SEALs shifted uncomfortably, the laughter dying down as they began to sense there was more to this woman than met the eye. Jack noticed it too but refused to admit it out loud. "Targets up," he barked, and the course came to life. The first wave of targets appeared at medium range, popping up randomly with only a fraction of a second to react. Emily raised her rifle and fired. The first target dropped instantly, then the second, then the third, each shot precise and perfectly timed. The group fell silent, the only sound the rhythmic crack of the rifle. She moved seamlessly through the sequence, her breathing controlled, her movements fluid. When the second wave began, this time with moving targets darting erratically, she didn't slow down. Her body adjusted naturally, her aim unerring. By the time she reached the final stage, a long-distance shot at a target barely visible on the horizon, every SEAL in the group was holding their breath. Emily exhaled slowly, squeezed the trigger, and the distant target dropped with a metallic clang. The range went dead silent. Slowly, Emily lowered her rifle and turned back to face Jack. The disbelief on his face was almost comical, his mouth slightly open as if searching for words that wouldn't come. The men behind him looked just as stunned, their earlier smirks replaced with wide-eyed respect. Emily broke the silence with a single sentence. "Seems like someone can hit that after all." Jack swallowed hard, trying to regain control of the situation, but the balance had shifted. The recruits were looking at Emily now, not him, their admiration obvious. He stepped forward, his voice tight. Where did you learn to shoot like that? Emily's expression didn't change. My father taught me, she said. He was a sniper. Retired before I was born, but he believed in passing down what he knew. We didn't have much growing up, but we had a small range on our property. I've been shooting since I was 8. Jack blinked, trying to process this. 8? That doesn't explain how you just did that. Those shots weren't just good. They were perfect. I've seen seasoned operatives miss half those targets. Emily shrugged lightly, as if it wasn't worth making a big deal out of. It's just focus. And patience. My dad always said, the rifle doesn't miss, the shooter does. I just try not to miss. Her calm demeanor only made her accomplishment more impressive. The recruits began whispering again, but this time their voices were filled with awe rather than ridicule. One of them stepped forward hesitantly. Ma'am, would you mind showing us how you did that? Maybe give us some pointers? Emily glanced at Jack as if seeking permission. His pride was clearly wounded, but he gave a stiff nod. Fine, he said through gritted teeth. Let her teach you. Maybe you'll learn something. Emily gave a small nod in return and walked toward the recruits, setting her rifle down carefully before demonstrating her stance and explaining her breathing techniques. As she spoke, the men listened intently, hanging on every word. For the first time, they weren't seeing her as a civilian or an outsider. She had earned her place among them in the most undeniable way possible. From a distance, Jack watched silently, his jaw tight. He knew what this meant, not just for his ego but for his team. They had just witnessed something extraordinary, something that shattered their assumptions about skill, gender, and experience. And deep down, though he hated to admit it, he felt a spark of respect for Emily Carter, the simple woman who had just proven them all wrong. The sun was beginning to dip lower in the sky, painting the training field with shades of orange and crimson, but no one moved to leave. The recruits were still gathered tightly around Emily, their faces intent as she explained techniques they had only read about in manuals but never fully understood. Jack stood off to the side, arms crossed, fighting a battle with himself. Every part of him wanted to dismiss her, to chalk up her performance to luck or some one-time fluke, but deep down he knew better. You don't hit every single target on that course, stationary and moving, by accident. That level of precision came from years of dedication, something he himself had spent his entire career trying to perfect. Watching her handle the rifle and break down her process in simple, methodical terms forced him to confront an uncomfortable truth. She might actually be better than him. Emily, for her part, remained calm and unassuming, never showing the slightest hint of arrogance. She demonstrated how she aligned her body to absorb recoil naturally, how she controlled her breathing so each shot became a rhythm instead of a rush, and how she tuned out distractions until only the target existed. Most people think shooting is about speed, she said, her voice quiet but carrying clearly in the still air. But speed comes from control. If you focus on being fast, you make mistakes. Focus on being perfect and the speed will come on its own. The recruits nodded eagerly, hanging on every word. They were used to their instructors yelling, pushing them to their limits through sheer force of will, but Emily's approach was different. She taught with patience, her explanations clear and simple, making concepts click in ways they never had before. It wasn't just skill she was showing them, it was understanding. Jack felt a pang of jealousy at how quickly his men warmed to her, their respect for her growing by the minute. Still, he couldn't let this go unchallenged. When Emily paused to let one of the younger recruits try the technique she'd shown, Jack stepped forward, his boots crunching against the packed dirt. All right, enough, he said sharply. The recruit froze mid-stance and backed away, eyes wide. Emily turned to face Jack, her expression unreadable. You've impressed them, Carter, Jack said, his voice clipped. Hell, you've impressed me. But this isn't some county fair competition. These men are training to fight in real combat where the targets shoot back. Hitting a few plates on a range doesn't mean you're ready for that. Emily's gaze didn't waver. I never said I was, she replied evenly. You're the one who assumed what I could or couldn't do. Jack bristled at her calm tone, feeling as if she'd just called him out in front of his men, which, in a way, she had. Then let's find out, he said after a tense pause. There's a simulation exercise we run to test readiness. Moving targets, changing terrain, unpredictable variables. No one's ever run it perfectly on their first try. If you can do that, I'll admit you're the real deal. Emily didn't blink. All right, she said simply. The recruits murmured excitedly, sensing the tension between their commander and the quiet stranger. Jack led the group to a different part of the compound, where an elaborate obstacle course sprawled across several acres of rugged terrain. It was designed to simulate real-world combat scenarios, complete with sound effects, smoke grenades, and even mock ambushes using paint rounds that stung like hell when they hit. The rules were simple. Eliminate every target without being hit yourself. Miss a target or get tagged and you fail. Jack explained the parameters briskly, emphasizing the difficulty. This isn't about standing still and picking off targets at your leisure, he said, his voice carrying across the field. You'll be running, diving, climbing, and making split-second decisions. It's designed to overwhelm you. Most first-timers don't even make it halfway. Emily studied the layout without comment, her eyes scanning the hills, trenches, and ruined buildings scattered across the course. Jack couldn't read her expression, which only irritated him further. When she finally spoke, her tone was as calm as ever. When do we start? Jack grit his teeth. Right now. A siren blared and the exercise began. Emily moved instantly, dropping low as the first set of targets popped up. Her rifle snapped to her shoulder, and 3 precise shots rang out in rapid succession, 3 targets down. She sprinted forward, weaving between cover with fluid grace, her movements efficient and economical. Smoke billowed from canisters hidden in the ground, obscuring her vision, but she didn't hesitate. She used her ears instead, firing at the sound of mechanical whirs that signaled a target's movement. Each shot found its mark. The recruits watching from the sidelines were silent, their eyes wide. They had seen top operators run this course and struggle. Emily wasn't struggling, she was flowing through it like water, adapting seamlessly to every challenge. Jack's jaw tightened as he watched, his earlier skepticism giving way to a grudging sense of awe. At the halfway point, the course changed dramatically. Instead of static targets, automated turrets began firing paint rounds, forcing Emily to dodge and take cover while still eliminating enemy combatants. A round whizzed past her head, splattering red against the wall behind her, but she didn't flinch. She rolled behind a barricade, popped up, and took out the turret with a single well-placed shot before moving on. Her breathing was steady, her pace relentless. By the time she reached the final sector, a simulated urban block with multiple levels and hidden threats, the recruits were whispering among themselves in disbelief. She hasn't missed a single target, one of them muttered. I don't think she's even been tagged. No way, another said, shaking his head. I've seen guys twice her size get shredded in that section. She's gotta slip up eventually. But Emily didn't slip up. She cleared each building systematically, checking corners and blind spots with the precision of a seasoned soldier. When the last target appeared on a rooftop across the compound, she dropped to one knee, steadied her rifle, and fired. The metallic clang of impact echoed through the field, followed by a deafening silence. Then the siren sounded again, signaling the end of the exercise. Emily stood slowly, lowering her rifle. Not a single mark of paint marred her clothing or skin. Every target had been hit. Perfect run. The recruits erupted into cheers, their earlier skepticism completely replaced by admiration. Even the most hardened among them couldn't hide their excitement. That was insane, one shouted. I didn't think it was even possible. Jack didn't cheer. He just stared at her, his mind racing. In all his years commanding this unit, he had never seen anyone do what she had just done, not even himself. Slowly he walked toward her, his boots crunching in the dirt. Emily met his gaze, her face calm and unreadable as always. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Jack exhaled and shook his head. Who are you, Carter? He asked, his voice quieter now, tinged with something that might have been respect. Emily hesitated, as if deciding how much to reveal. Just someone who learned to survive, she said at last. My father taught me how to shoot. Life taught me the rest. Jack studied her carefully, then nodded once. You've got skill. More than skill, you've got instinct. That's something you can't teach. He glanced back at his men who were still buzzing with excitement. These recruits need to learn from the best. And right now that's you. Emily tilted her head slightly. You want me to train them? I want you to make them better, Jack said simply. Clearly you've got something we don't. Whatever it is, they need it. For the first time, a faint smile touched Emily's lips. All right, she said softly. I'll help. Jack extended his hand and after a brief pause, Emily shook it. Around them, the recruits watched in awe, knowing they had just witnessed the beginning of something extraordinary. The next morning dawned gray and cold, a low mist clinging to the training compound like a living thing. The recruits were already assembled by the time Emily arrived, their rifles slung over their shoulders, their expressions tense with anticipation. Word of her flawless run through the combat simulation had spread like wildfire, not just among the trainees but throughout the entire base. Even seasoned operators who had been skeptical of her presence now watched her with a mixture of curiosity and grudging respect. Emily walked toward them quietly, her steps measured, her posture relaxed but unmistakably confident. She didn't wear a uniform like the others, only her same worn jeans and plain shirt, yet somehow she seemed to command more authority than anyone else present. The recruits straightened unconsciously as she passed, as though her mere presence demanded it. Jack was waiting near the edge of the range, his hands clasped behind his back, his face unreadable. He gave her a brief nod, acknowledging her arrival without a word. Emily returned the nod, then turned her attention to the men before her. "Today we start with the basics," she said calmly. "And by basics I mean the things you think you already know. Fundamentals are what keep you alive when everything else falls apart." Her tone wasn't harsh or commanding, but there was a quiet authority in it that made every man listen closely. She began by having them line up and demonstrate their shooting stances. At first, they moved with the practiced motions they'd been taught by military instructors, but Emily quickly spotted flaws they hadn't even realized were there. She adjusted their feet, shifted their shoulders, corrected their grip, all with a few quiet words and a gentle touch when necessary. Each correction immediately improved their stability and aim. "You're relying too much on muscle," she told one recruit, a tall, muscular man who had been trying to overpower the rifle instead of working with it. "Strength helps, but precision comes from alignment and balance. Think of it like dancing. The rifle should move with you, not against you." The recruit frowned at first, clearly skeptical, but when he tried it her way, his next shot hit dead center on the target. His eyes widened, and he looked at her with newfound respect. "Ha," he muttered. "That actually works." Emily allowed herself a small smile. "Told you." As the morning wore on, she introduced more advanced techniques. Shooting while moving, controlling breathing under stress, reading environmental cues like wind and sound. The recruits were pushed harder than they'd ever been before, but Emily's calm, precise teaching made the lessons stick in a way yelling and drills never had. Even Jack, standing silently off to the side, couldn't deny the results. By midday, their accuracy and reaction times had noticeably improved. During a short break, one of the younger recruits, a wiry kid named Ben, approached Emily hesitantly. "Ma'am," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Can I ask you something?" Emily nodded. "Go ahead." Ben glanced around nervously, then leaned closer. "How do you stay so calm out there? I mean, even in the simulation yesterday you didn't hesitate once. My hands shake like crazy whenever I know I'm about to take a shot. It messes me up every time." Emily studied him for a moment, then knelt so they were at eye level. "Your body reacts to fear," she explained gently. "Shaking hands, rapid heartbeat, shallow breathing. You can't stop those reactions completely, but you can control how you respond to them. When you feel the fear rising, focus on your breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Slow it down. Each breath should be steady and deliberate. The more control you have over your breath, the more control you have over everything else." Ben nodded slowly, soaking in her words. "Thanks," he said quietly. "I'll try that." "Don't just try," Emily said firmly but kindly. "Do it. Fear is a teacher, Ben. Listen to it but don't let it rule you." Their moment was interrupted by the blare of an alarm. Everyone turned toward the main gate, where a cluster of vehicles had just pulled in. A group of uniformed men emerged, their movements sharp and purposeful. At their head was a stern-looking officer Emily didn't recognize. Jack's posture stiffened immediately. "Colonel Briggs," he muttered under his breath. Emily caught the name and glanced at him. "Friend of yours?" she asked. Jack's expression darkened. "Hardly. He's here to evaluate our unit. He's not exactly a fan of outsiders." As if on cue, Briggs strode toward them, his boots striking the ground with crisp precision. His gaze swept over the recruits, then landed on Emily. His eyes narrowed. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice cold. "Why is there a civilian on my range?" Jack stepped forward quickly. "She's not just a civilian, sir. Emily Carter has been assisting with training. She's proven herself to be an exceptional marksman and instructor." Briggs snorted. "Exceptional? This isn't some backwoods shooting club, Reynolds. These are Navy SEAL recruits. They don't need to be taking orders from some farm girl with a lucky shot." The recruits bristled at his dismissive tone, several of them exchanging angry looks. Before Jack could respond, Emily spoke up, her voice calm but firm. "Sir, with respect, luck had nothing to do with it. I ran your simulation yesterday. Perfect score. No misses, no hits on me." Briggs turned his head slowly, Disbelief etched on his face. You expect me to believe that? Jack held up a tablet, pulling up the recorded data from the exercise. It's all here, sir. She cleared the course flawlessly. Briggs snatched the tablet and scanned the report, his scowl deepening with each line. When he finally looked up, his expression was a mix of anger and reluctant acknowledgement. Fine, he said grudgingly. Maybe you got lucky once. But real combat isn't about perfect scores and clean data. It's chaos. It's blood and noise and panic. Let's see how she handles that. Emily tilted her head slightly. What are you proposing? Briggs gestured to his men. We're running a live-fire drill this afternoon. Full-scale simulation. Teams on both sides, real tactics, real consequences. If you're as good as Reynolds says, you can lead a team of recruits against mine. Jack's eyes widened. Sir, Briggs cut him off with a sharp gesture. That's an order, Reynolds. Unless you're afraid your little prodigy might embarrass you. Emily met Briggs' glare without flinching. I'll do it, she said simply. The recruits erupted into whispers of excitement and nerves. Jack turned to her, his voice low and urgent. Emily, this isn't like the course yesterday. This will be unpredictable. Dangerous. Emily's gaze was steady. I know. But if he wants to see what I can do, I'll show him. Briggs smirked, clearly thinking he'd set her up for failure. Good. You have 2 hours to prepare. Don't be late. As he strode away, Emily turned to face the recruits. Their faces were a mixture of fear and determination. It could see how much they wanted to prove themselves, not just for her but for their own pride. Listen up, she said, her voice carrying over the murmurs. This isn't just a drill. It's a chance to show what you've learned, to prove that you can work as a team under pressure. Briggs wants us to fail. We're not going to give him that satisfaction. The recruits straightened, their earlier uncertainty replaced with resolve. Jack watched them, a spark of hope flickering in his chest. For the first time he believed they might actually have a chance. Emily looked over her team, her expression calm and focused. 2 hours, she said. Let's get ready. The 2 hours leading up to the live-fire drill passed in a blur of movement and preparation, every second heavy with tension. Emily gathered the recruits in a tight circle inside one of the compound's briefing tents, her voice calm but carrying a quiet authority that held their attention completely. Maps and diagrams of the simulated combat zone were spread out on a table in front of her, illuminated by the dim glow of a single overhead lamp. The terrain included dense patches of woodland, a cluster of abandoned buildings meant to mimic an urban environment, open fields that offered no cover, and several choke points where ambushes were likely to occur. Emily studied it carefully, then looked up at the men, meeting each of their eyes in turn. Colonel Briggs is expecting us to fight his way, she said steadily. He's counting on us to react the way trainees normally do, by panicking and rushing headlong into traps. We're not going to do that. We're going to stay disciplined, stay quiet, and make every move count. The recruits nodded, some swallowing hard, others gripping their rifles more tightly. She pointed to the map, tracing potential routes with her finger. He'll have more experience and more firepower, so we need to outthink him. That means misdirection. We'll split into 3 squads. Squad 1 will take the north route through the trees, moving silently to flank them. Squad 2 will circle west, using the terrain to stay hidden. My squad will move straight up the center, not to engage but to draw their attention. When they focus on us, the other squads will strike from the sides. She looked around at the group, her expression serious. Timing will be everything. If anyone fires too early, the whole plan falls apart. So no one fires unless they have a clear shot and I give the signal. Understood. A chorus of yes, ma'am rose from the recruits, their voices steady despite the nerves they felt. Jack stood in the corner, arms crossed, watching silently. His face was impassive, but inside he was wrestling with conflicting emotions, pride, fear, and a growing respect for Emily's natural leadership. She wasn't just skilled with a rifle, she understood strategy on a level few people did. As the recruits dispersed to prepare their gear, Jack approached her. You're taking a big risk, he said quietly. Briggs isn't going to play fair. If he sees you gaining the upper hand, he'll change the rules on the fly. Emily's gaze was calm, almost serene. I know, she replied. But he's also predictable. Men like him always underestimate the enemy until it's too late. Jack studied her for a moment, then gave a short nod. Just be careful. These recruits look up to you now. If something happens to you out there, she cut him off with a faint smile. Nothing's going to happen to me. Her confidence was unshakable, and for reasons Jack couldn't fully explain, It eased some of the knot of worry in his chest. By the time the sun had begun to set, casting long shadows across the training compound, both teams were assembled at the starting line. Briggs stood at the head of his unit, a group of seasoned soldiers who moved with the ease and precision of men who had been through countless missions together. They looked over at Emily's team with thinly veiled contempt, some smirking openly. Briggs himself wore a self-satisfied grin, clearly expecting an easy victory. "This is going to be over quick," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Don't worry, Reynolds, we'll try not to humiliate your recruits too badly." Jack clenched his jaw but didn't rise to the bait. Emily, standing at the front of her team, didn't even glance in Briggs' direction. Her focus was entirely on her recruits. She gave them one last look, silently conveying trust and resolve, then nodded once. The siren blared, signaling the start of the exercise, and chaos erupted. Emily moved instantly, her squad sprinting toward the center route while staying low and quiet. Behind them, Squad 1 and Squad 2 melted into the trees and tall grass, disappearing from sight. Briggs' men advanced aggressively, their movements loud and confident. They fired early and often, paint rounds cracking through the air, splattering against trees and rocks. Emily didn't return fire. She signaled her squad to hold, using hand gestures to direct their movements. They darted between cover points, deliberately making just enough noise to suggest panic without revealing their true positions. As expected, Briggs took the bait. "Push forward," he barked. "They're breaking." His men surged ahead, leaving gaps in their formation. That was when Squad 1 struck. Hidden in the northern treeline, they opened fire in a coordinated burst, hitting 3 of Briggs' men before they even knew what was happening. Shouts of confusion rang out as Briggs wheeled around, trying to locate the source of the attack. "Contact left. Spread out," he ordered. While his attention was split, Squad 2 hit from the west, their fire precise and controlled. Within seconds, Briggs' unit was caught in a crossfire, their confidence shaken. Emily seized the moment. She led her squad forward, finally opening fire with deadly accuracy. Her shots were calm and deliberate, each one taking down a target without hesitation. The recruits followed her lead, their earlier training kicking in as they moved and fired with precision. Briggs realized too late what was happening. "Fall back. Regroup," he shouted, but his voice was nearly drowned out by the sound of paint rounds striking armor and the shouts of his men. The battlefield had become a chaotic whirlwind, but within that chaos, Emily's strategy was unfolding perfectly. Every move had been anticipated, every reaction predicted. Briggs was playing her game now, not his own. At one point, Emily spotted Briggs himself moving toward a nearby building, clearly intending to set up a defensive position. Without hesitation, she sprinted after him, signaling her squad to cover her. She reached the building just as he disappeared inside. The interior was dark and cluttered, filled with overturned tables and debris meant to simulate urban cover. Emily moved silently, her breathing steady, her senses heightened. She could hear Briggs somewhere ahead, his footsteps heavy as he tried to set up an ambush. Using the skills her father had taught her long ago, she tracked the sound, staying just out of sight. When she finally spotted him crouched behind a barricade, his rifle aimed toward the doorway, she didn't rush. Instead, she circled quietly to his blind side, her steps impossibly soft. By the time Briggs realized she was there, it was already over. Emily raised her rifle and fired a single shot, the paint round striking him squarely in the chest. He froze, stunned, then looked up at her. With disbelief. "Impossible," he muttered. Emily's voice was calm, almost gentle. "No," she said. "Just focus." Outside, Briggs' remaining men were falling one by one under the coordinated assault of the recruits. Within minutes, the last of them was eliminated, and the battlefield fell silent except for the heavy breathing of the victors. The siren sounded again, signaling the end of the drill. The recruits erupted into cheers, throwing their fists into the air, their faces alight with triumph. They had done the impossible, defeated a team of experienced soldiers under the leadership of a woman Briggs had dismissed as a nobody. Jack approached Emily, his expression a mix of pride and amazement. "You did it," he said quietly. Emily shook her head. "We did it," she corrected. "They followed through. They trusted each other." Briggs emerged from the building, paint splattered across his chest, his face red with anger and humiliation. For a long moment he said nothing, just glared at Emily and her recruits. Then, without a word, he turned and stalked away, his defeated men trailing behind him. Jack watched him go, then turned back to Emily. "He won't forget this," he warned. Emily met his gaze steadily. Neither will they, she said, nodding toward the recruits. And that matters more. The recruits gathered around her, cheering her name, their respect for her now absolute. In that moment, Emily Carter wasn't just a teacher or an outsider. She was their leader, the one who had shown them what they were truly capable of, and no one, not even Colonel Briggs, could take that away. The victory over Briggs' team reverberated through the entire base like a shockwave. By dawn the next day, everyone was talking about it. Recruits from other units were whispering in mess halls and barracks, sharing second-hand accounts of the impossible drill. Some swore they'd seen it themselves, how Emily's team of raw trainees had outmaneuvered and outshot a group of seasoned operators. Others refused to believe it, convinced there had to be some trick or manipulation involved. But no one could deny the official record. Every action had been captured on the range's cameras, and the footage didn't lie. Emily Carter had led a group of so-called rookies to a flawless victory against overwhelming odds. As Emily walked across the compound that morning, the atmosphere had shifted. Where before there had been skepticism and laughter at her expense, now there were nods of respect and even quiet salutes. She didn't bask in the attention, nor did she seek it. She moved with the same quiet confidence as always, her worn boots crunching softly on the gravel, her eyes focused ahead. Jack fell into step beside her, his face serious. "Briggs is furious," he said without preamble. "He spent half the night filing complaints up the chain of command. Claims you violated procedure, used unfair tactics, undermined his authority." Emily didn't even glance at him. "Did we break any actual rules?" "No," Jack admitted, though his tone suggested he wished the answer were more complicated. "Every move you made was within regulation. Hell, it was textbook strategy, just executed better than anyone expected." Emily gave a small shrug. "Then he's just angry he lost." Jack let out a humorless laugh. "You don't know Briggs. Men like him don't take humiliation lightly. He'll come at you harder next time. Maybe not today, maybe not even this week, but he'll be planning something." Emily stopped walking and turned to face him. Her expression was calm, but there was a spark of steel in her eyes. "Then we'll be ready," she said simply. Jack studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Fair enough." They resumed walking, heading toward the range where the recruits were already assembled for the day's training. The energy among the men was electric. They stood taller, moved sharper, their confidence renewed by their hard-won victory. When Emily approached, they straightened instinctively, their eyes filled with respect and pride. She gave them a brief nod before addressing them. "Yesterday was a test," she said, her voice carrying clearly over the morning air. "You passed. Not because you had better weapons or more experience, but because you trusted each other and followed the plan. That's what makes a team. That's what wins battles." The recruits listened intently, hanging on every word. Emily's gaze swept over them, sharp and assessing. "But don't let one victory make you complacent. Out there, in the real world, there are no second chances. The enemy won't care how good you were yesterday. They'll only care about what you can do today. So we train harder. We get sharper. We stay ready." A unified shout of "Yes, ma'am," echoed back, strong and resolute. Training began immediately, and Emily pushed them harder than ever before. She ran them through grueling endurance drills, tested their marksmanship under stress, and forced them to work together under increasingly complex scenarios. Whenever someone faltered, she didn't yell or berate them. Instead, she calmly broke down their mistakes, showing them how to correct and improve. Her style was demanding but fair, and the recruits responded with fierce determination. As the day wore on, Jack couldn't help but notice how dramatically the unit had changed since Emily's arrival. They moved like a single entity now, their coordination and discipline far beyond what he'd expected at this stage of training. It was as if she had unlocked something inside them that no amount of traditional instruction ever could. By late afternoon, the men were exhausted but exhilarated. Emily called a halt and gathered them around. "You've done well," she said, her tone softer now. "Go rest. Sleep. Tomorrow we do it again." The recruits dispersed, their faces shining with sweat and pride. As they left, Jack approached Emily, his brow furrowed. "You're building them into something remarkable," he said. "But it's only going to make Briggs more determined to tear it down." Emily gave a small, humorless smile. "Then he'll have to work harder." Jack shook his head, clearly uneasy. "You don't understand how dangerous he can be. He's already talking about pulling strings to have you removed from the program. If he can't beat you on the field, he'll try to destroy you off it." Emily's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes, resolve, maybe, or defiance. "He can try," she said quietly. "But I didn't come here for his approval. I came here to make sure these men are ready for whatever they'll face out there. That's all that matters. That night, the compound was quieter than usual. Most of the recruits were asleep, their bodies too drained to do anything but collapse into their bunks. Emily sat alone in the dimly lit mess hall, cleaning her rifle with methodical precision. The repetitive motion was soothing, a way to clear her mind. She thought of her father, of the countless hours they'd spent together on the makeshift range back home. His voice echoed in her memory, "The rifle doesn't miss, the shooter does. Never blame the weapon. On every shot you take." It had been his mantra and now it was hers. Footsteps approached, breaking her reverie. Jack entered, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. He set one down in front of her and took a seat across the table. "Can't sleep either?" he asked. Emily shook her head. "Too much on my mind." Jack sipped his coffee, studying her. "I've been thinking about what you said earlier about making sure these men are ready. You've done more for them in a few weeks than some instructors do in months. But why? What's driving you, Emily? You didn't have to come here. You don't owe the Navy anything." For a moment, Emily didn't answer. She stared at the rifle in her hands, her fingers tightening around it. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, almost a whisper. "My brother," she said. "He was a SEAL. He died on a mission overseas. No one ever told me exactly what happened, just that it went wrong. He was leading a team of young recruits and they weren't ready. They didn't have the training they needed. He tried to save them but in the end her voice caught but she forced herself to continue. I swore that day I'd never let it happen again. If I could make even one team stronger, sharper, more prepared, maybe I could keep someone else's brother from dying like mine did." Jack sat in stunned silence, the weight of her words sinking in. Suddenly, everything made sense. Her relentless drive, her calm under pressure, her refusal to back down no matter what Briggs threw at her. "Emily," he said softly, "I had no idea. I didn't come here for sympathy," she said, looking up at him with steady eyes. "I came here to make a difference. That's all." Jack nodded slowly, respect and understanding mingling in his gaze. "You've already made one. More than you know." Before Emily could respond, a loud, sharp alarm blared through the night. Both of them were on their feet instantly, instincts kicking in. Red emergency lights began flashing, bathing the mess hall in a harsh glow. Jack grabbed his radio. "What's happening?" Static crackled, then a frantic voice came through. "Perimeter breach. Unknown hostiles, East Sector." Jack's expression hardened. "It's not a drill," he said grimly. Emily's grip tightened on her rifle. "Then we move," she said. Without another word, they sprinted out into the night, ready to face whatever threat had come crashing through their gates. The night exploded into chaos the moment Emily and Jack stepped outside. The cool air was thick with smoke and the sharp crack of gunfire. Searchlights swept frantically across the compound, illuminating figures darting through the shadows. Shouts and orders overlapped in a deafening chorus as recruits scrambled from their bunks, some still half-dressed, grabbing rifles and rushing toward defensive positions. Emily's eyes scanned the scene with razor-sharp focus, taking in every detail: the direction of the incoming fire, the positions of the recruits, the weak points in their hastily formed perimeter. She immediately spotted a gap near the east wall where 3 hostiles had already breached the fence. Without hesitation she sprinted toward it, Jack right on her heels. "Contact east wall," she shouted, her voice cutting through the din. "Squad 3 with me." Several recruits followed her lead, their fear evident but tempered by their trust in her. Emily dropped to one knee behind a sandbag barricade and fired. Her shot struck one of the intruders squarely, dropping him instantly. The second tried to retreat, but Jack took him down with a controlled burst. The third vanished into the darkness, forcing Emily to hold fire rather than waste ammunition. "Stay sharp," she ordered, reloading smoothly. "They'll try to flank us." Jack glanced at her, sweat glistening on his forehead. "Who the hell are these guys? This isn't some random attack." Emily didn't answer immediately. She was listening, filtering through the noise to catch patterns in the enemy's movements. When she spoke, her voice was grim. "This was planned. They're too coordinated to be amateurs." Even as she said it, another wave of hostiles hit the western sector, drawing away some of their defenders. Over the radio, frantic calls for reinforcements came through. Emily grabbed her mic. "Squad 2, hold your position. Squad 1, cut off their retreat routes. Don't let them box us in." She turned to Jack. "We need to secure the east wall completely or we're done." Jack nodded, understanding immediately. Together they led a rapid counterattack, moving from cover to cover with lethal precision. Emily's recruits followed her without hesitation, their training kicking in despite the chaos. She directed them like a conductor leading an orchestra, every command precise and purposeful. Slowly they began to push the attackers back. But just as they started gaining ground, a deafening explosion ripped through the compound, throwing Emily to the ground. Her ears rang, her vision swam, but she forced herself up, coughing through the smoke. A section of the perimeter wall had been completely destroyed, leaving a gaping hole. Through it more hostiles poured in. For a heartbeat, panic threatened to take hold. The recruits wavered, their lines faltering. Emily saw it happening and knew this was the critical moment. If they broke now, the entire base would fall. She rose to her feet, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Hold the line," she bellowed. "This is our ground. No one takes it from us." Her words hit like a jolt of electricity. The recruits rallied, their fear replaced by determination. They formed a tight defensive ring around the breach, firing in controlled bursts as Emily moved among them, steadying hands, giving quick instructions, never staying in one place long enough to become a target. Jack joined her, his face set in grim determination. "We can't hold forever," he shouted over the gunfire. "We need to figure out who's leading this attack and take them out." Emily scanned the incoming wave, looking for signs of command structure. Then she saw him, a tall figure at the rear, giving hand signals and directing the assault. Unlike the others, he moved with calm precision. Emily grabbed Jack's shoulder and pointed. "There. He's the key. If we drop him, the rest will scatter." Jack didn't hesitate. "I'll cover you," he said. Emily shook her head. "No. I need you here to keep them steady. If this line breaks while I'm gone, it's over." Jack opened his mouth to argue, then saw the resolve in her eyes and closed it again. He gave a short nod. "Go." Emily broke away from the defensive ring, moving low and fast through the wreckage. She slipped between shadows, using the smoke and debris as cover. Every step brought her closer to the enemy leader. She was so focused she almost didn't hear the familiar voice behind her. "Carter." It was Briggs. He emerged from the darkness, rifle in hand, his face flushed with fury. "What the hell is going on here?" Emily didn't slow down. "Ask me later. Right now, either help or get out of my way." Briggs stared at her, momentarily stunned by her bluntness. Then, to her surprise, he fell in beside her. "Fine," he growled. "But this isn't over." Together they crept closer to the enemy leader. When they were within range, Emily raised her rifle, steadying her breath just as her father had taught her. She squeezed the trigger and the leader dropped instantly. The effect was immediate. The attackers faltered, their movements losing cohesion. Some turned and fled, while others were quickly cut down by the recruits. Briggs let out a sharp whistle. "Hell of a shot," he muttered grudgingly. Emily didn't respond. She was already moving back toward the breach, shouting orders to press the advantage. The recruits surged forward, driving the remaining hostiles out of the compound. Within minutes, the fighting was over. The air was filled with the acrid smell of smoke and the moans of the wounded. Emily moved among the injured, checking on each one personally. Miraculously, her unit had held together with minimal losses. Jack approached, his face streaked with grime but his eyes bright with relief. "You did it," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion. Emily shook her head. "We did it," she corrected automatically. Briggs joined them, his usual arrogance tempered by what he'd just witnessed. He looked at Emily for a long moment before speaking. "I underestimated you," he admitted grudgingly. "I won't make that mistake again." Emily met his gaze evenly. "Good. Because next time, underestimating us might get people killed." Briggs nodded once, then turned to bark orders at his men, organizing cleanup efforts and securing the perimeter. As the adrenaline faded, Jack pulled Emily aside. "You know this wasn't random," he said quietly. "Someone sent them. Someone who knew exactly how to hit us where it hurt." Emily nodded, her jaw tight. "And we're going to find out who." She glanced around at the recruits, who were already helping rebuild the damaged sections of the base despite their exhaustion. Their faces were smeared with soot and dirt, but their eyes burned with fierce pride. "Tonight proved something," she said softly. "They're ready for more than drills. They're ready for the real fight." Jack followed her gaze, then looked back at her. "So what's our next move?" Emily took a deep breath, feeling the weight of leadership settle on her shoulders. "First, we patch up the wounded and fortify this base. Then we start gathering intel. Whoever's behind this thinks they can scare us into submission." Her voice hardened, cold and sharp as steel. "They're about to learn how wrong they are. The night was far from over, but the balance had shifted. The recruits who had once been doubted and dismissed now stood ready, forged in fire by the woman no one had believed in. And Emily Carter, the so-called simple woman from nowhere, was no longer just a teacher or a symbol. She was a warrior, and war had come to her doorstep. The first pale light of dawn stretched across the horizon as Emily stood at the edge of the compound, surveying the damage. The night's battle had left scars everywhere. The shredded remains of the eastern fence, burned-out vehicles smoldering in blackened craters, the acrid tang of smoke lingering in the air. Exhausted recruits moved in grim silence, hauling debris, reinforcing barricades and tending to the wounded. Despite their fatigue, there was a steadiness to their movements now, a quiet strength that hadn't been there before. They had faced death and held their ground. They were no longer just recruits, they were soldiers forged in the crucible of battle. Jack approached with a clipboard tucked under his arm, his uniform streaked with soot. "We've accounted for everyone," he reported, his voice hoarse from shouting orders through the night. 4 wounded seriously but no fatalities. That's a miracle considering what we were up against. Emily gave a short nod, relief flashing briefly in her eyes. "And the attackers?" 20 confirmed dead, Jack said grimly. "A handful captured alive, but they're not talking. Whoever sent them trained them well." He handed her a small device, a radio earpiece charred and broken. "We found this on one of the bodies. Military-grade encrypted. Definitely not random raiders." Emily turned the device over in her hand, her mind racing. This was coordinated. Someone knew our layout, our weaknesses, even our schedules. "There's a mole." Jack's jaw tightened. "Briggs thinks so too. He's already interrogating the prisoners, but..." His voice trailed off and his expression darkened. Emily understood. Briggs' interrogation methods were notoriously brutal. "Keep an eye on him," she said firmly. "We need answers, but we also need to keep our integrity intact. If we cross that line, we're no better than them." Jack nodded reluctantly. "I'll do what I can." As he moved away, Emily's gaze swept over the recruits working tirelessly to restore order. They were bruised and battered, but there was a fire in their eyes now, a unity born of shared struggle. She felt a swell of pride mixed with a fierce protectiveness. These men had trusted her when no one else did. She wouldn't let that trust be betrayed. Briggs appeared suddenly, striding toward her with his usual commanding presence. His uniform was immaculate despite the chaos, his expression unreadable. "Carter," he barked. "Walk with me." Emily fell into step beside him, matching his pace. They moved through the compound in silence for several moments before Briggs spoke. "Last night shouldn't have been possible," he said finally. "An armed force breaching our defenses, hitting us with that level of precision, it's unacceptable." Emily didn't flinch. "Agreed. Which is why we need to figure out who's behind it." Briggs stopped abruptly, turning to face her. "Don't play games with me, Carter. You think I don't know you suspect someone on the inside? I can see it in your eyes." Emily met his gaze steadily. "If you know something, now's the time to share it." Briggs' lips thinned into a hard line. "All I know is that someone fed them intel. Someone close. Until we root out the traitor, this entire base is vulnerable." Emily studied him carefully, noting the flicker of frustration beneath his controlled exterior. "You seem awfully certain about that," she said slowly. Briggs' eyes narrowed. "Are you implying I'm involved?" Emily held his gaze without blinking. "I'm implying nothing. But trust is earned, not given." For a tense moment, they stood locked in silent battle. Then Briggs exhaled sharply and turned away. "Interrogations continue at 0900, he said curtly. "Be there. I want your read on these bastards." As he stalked off, Emily's mind churned. Briggs was right about one thing: someone had betrayed them. But whether he was as determined to uncover the truth as he claimed remained to be seen. Hours later, Emily stood in the dimly lit interrogation room, watching through a one-way mirror as a prisoner sat shackled to a metal chair. His face was bruised, his eyes cold and defiant. Briggs paced in front of him like a predator, firing questions in rapid succession. The prisoner remained silent, his lips pressed into a thin line. Emily observed every twitch, every glance, every subtle shift in posture. She wasn't just listening to words, she was reading the man's soul. Finally, she spoke into the intercom. "Pause." Briggs shot her an annoyed glare but complied, stepping back. Emily entered the room, her presence calm and unthreatening. She pulled up a chair and sat directly across from the prisoner, folding her hands on the table. "You've been trained to resist interrogation," she said softly. "I respect that. It means you're not just some hired thug. You believe in something. The prisoner's eyes flickered, just for an instant. Emily caught it. The men you fought last night, did they believe too? Or were they just following orders while someone safe and comfortable pulled the strings? Silence. Emily leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to a near whisper. You saw my recruits out there. Kids, barely more than civilians. They fought like hell to protect this place. They didn't ask for this fight, but they gave everything they had. Do you really want to keep protecting the person who sent you to slaughter them? For the first time, doubt crossed the prisoner's face. He hesitated, then muttered a single word, Cipher. Emily's pulse quickened. Cipher? Is that a name? A code name? The prisoner nodded once, almost imperceptibly. Before she could press further, Briggs cut in sharply. That's enough. We'll handle it from here. He gestured for guards to remove the prisoner. Emily stood, her jaw tight. You heard him. He gave us something. We need to follow up. Briggs glared at her. And we will. But this is my operation, Carter. Don't forget that. Emily didn't respond. She walked out of the room, but her mind was racing. Cipher. The word echoed in her thoughts like a warning bell. Whoever this cipher was, they had orchestrated the attack. And if the prisoner was to be believed, they weren't finished. Outside, Jack was waiting. Well, he asked. Emily told him what she'd learned. Jack's brow furrowed. Cipher. Never heard of them. Neither have I, Emily admitted. But someone has. We need intel, fast. Jack hesitated, then said, I might have a contact. Someone who owes me a favor. Off the books. Emily considered this, then nodded. Do it. Quietly. Briggs can't know, not yet. As they spoke, a commotion erupted near the west gate. Both of them rushed over to find a group of recruits clustered around a small package lying in the dirt. Emily pushed through the crowd and froze. The package was a simple metal box, unmarked except for a single word etched into the lid. Cipher. Slowly she opened it. Inside was a single bullet, gleaming in the early morning light. And beneath it, a note with a chilling message. Next time there won't be a warning. A cold knot formed in Emily's gut. This wasn't just about defending a base anymore. This was personal. Cipher wasn't done, not by a long shot. She closed the box and turned to Jack, her voice low and deadly calm. Get the men ready. Whatever's coming next, we face it head-on. Jack nodded, his expression grim. And Cipher? Emily's eyes burned with determination. We hunt them down. The discovery of the box sent a ripple of unease through the base. Emily stood in the center of the compound, the recruits gathered around her, their faces pale and tense as they stared at the bullet and the ominous note. The sun was barely above the horizon, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch like dark fingers across the battered compound. Emily closed the box carefully and handed it to Jack. Lock this in the secure room, she ordered, her voice calm and steady despite the storm raging inside her. Jack nodded and moved quickly, his eyes scanning the perimeter as if expecting Cipher to strike again at any moment. Emily turned to the recruits, raising her voice so everyone could hear. Listen up. Last night we were attacked by an enemy who thought they could break us. They failed. Today they sent us a message. They think fear will do what their bullets couldn't. She paused, letting her gaze sweep over each face. But they're wrong. We don't scare. We fight. And when they come back, and they will, we'll be ready. A unified roar of determination rose from the recruits, their fear burned away by Emily's words. She felt a surge of pride, but she knew it was only temporary. Cipher wouldn't stop. This was just the beginning. When the men dispersed to their duties, Emily pulled Jack aside. We don't have much time, she said in a low voice. Tell me about your contact. Jack hesitated, glancing around to make sure they weren't overheard. His name's Ryan Mercer. Former intelligence officer. Got pushed out for asking too many questions about classified ops. If anyone can dig up info on Cipher, it's him. How do we reach him? Emily asked. He operates out of a safe house in the city, Jack replied. But it's risky. If Briggs finds out we're going around him, it'll blow up in our faces. Emily's jaw tightened. We don't have a choice. Briggs is either compromised or too blinded by his ego to see the truth. We move tonight. That evening, under the cover of darkness, Emily and Jack slipped out of the base in an unmarked jeep. The city was an hour away, a maze of narrow streets and abandoned industrial buildings. They drove in silence, both lost in their own thoughts. Emily's mind replayed the events of the past few days, the attack, the interrogation, the box with the bullet. Every detail pointed to a carefully orchestrated campaign designed to destabilize the base and erode trust from within. Cypher wasn't just a name. It was a ghost pulling strings from the shadows. They arrived at the safe house just after midnight. It was a nondescript building, its windows boarded up, its exterior blending seamlessly with the surrounding decay. Jack knocked in a precise pattern. After a tense moment, a peephole slid open and a pair of sharp eyes peered out. "Password," a voice demanded. "Eagle Rising," Jack replied. The door opened, revealing a lean man with graying hair and a wary expression. "Jack," he said, relief flickering across his features. "Didn't expect to see you again." "Didn't expect to need you again," Jack said grimly. "Ryan, this is Emily Carter. She's the reason we're still alive." Ryan's gaze shifted to Emily, assessing her with the practiced eye of someone who had seen too many lies. Finally he nodded. "Come in." Inside, the safe house was cramped but well-equipped. Maps and surveillance photos covered the walls, and a bank of computer monitors hummed softly in one corner. Ryan gestured for them to sit. "Tell me what you're up against," he said. Emily wasted no time. She laid out everything: the attack, the prisoners, the mention of Cypher, the threatening message. Ryan listened intently, his expression growing darker with each detail. When she finished, he leaned back, exhaling slowly. "Cypher isn't just a code name," he said finally. "It's an entire network. Black ops, rogue agents, mercenaries. They specialize in destabilization, taking down military units from the inside out. If they've targeted you, it means someone wants that base destroyed." Emily's hands clenched into fists. "Who?" "That's the tricky part," Ryan admitted. "Cypher works through layers of intermediaries. Even their own operatives rarely know who's calling the shots. But," he tapped a key on his computer, bringing up a grainy photo. "I've been tracking a man who might be your link. Real name unknown. Goes by Shade. He's Cypher's field commander, the one who coordinates attacks like the one you faced." Emily studied the photo. The man's face was partially obscured, but his bearing was unmistakably dangerous. "Where do we find him?" Ryan hesitated. "He's operating out of an old factory on the outskirts of the city. But be warned, going after him is suicide without backup." Emily's voice was cold and certain. "We don't have the luxury of waiting. If Shade lives, more of my men will die." Jack touched her arm. "Emily, think this through. We can't just storm in there." "We won't storm," she said. "We'll infiltrate. In and out before they know what hit them." Ryan shook his head, clearly uneasy. "You've got guts, Carter, I'll give you that. But guts won't stop Cypher." Emily met his gaze unflinchingly. "Maybe not. But precision will." 2 hours later, Emily and Jack crept through the ruins of the factory complex, dressed in black and moving like shadows. Ryan had provided them with schematics and intel, but it was clear the enemy was well prepared. Guards patrolled in disciplined patterns, their weapons state-of-the-art. Emily signaled to Jack and they split up, flanking the outer perimeter. She moved silently, her breath steady, her mind focused. This was what she had trained for, not drills or exercises but real combat where every decision meant life or death. Reaching a vantage point, Emily spotted Shade through a broken window. He was exactly as the photo showed, tall, lean, radiating quiet menace. He spoke to two subordinates, gesturing at a map spread across a table. Emily's pulse quickened. This was it. She raised her rifle, but before she could take the shot, a voice hissed in her earpiece. "Emily, wait. Something's wrong." It was Jack. She froze. "What is it?" "I just intercepted a transmission," Jack said urgently. "They knew we were coming. It's a trap." Even as the words left his mouth, floodlights blazed to life, blinding Emily. Sirens wailed and armed men poured from hidden doorways, surrounding her position. Shade turned, a cruel smile playing at his lips. "Carter," he called mockingly. "I was hoping you'd come." Emily dove for cover as bullets tore through the wall behind her. She fired back, dropping two attackers before rolling into a deeper shadow. Over the radio, Jack's voice was frantic. "I'm pinned down. Too many of them." Emily's mind raced. They couldn't win this fight head-on. "Fall back toward the east exit," she ordered. "We'll regroup." Jack hesitated. "What about Shade?" Emily's eyes locked on the man through the chaos. "I'll handle him." Moving with deadly precision, she cut through the enemy lines, her rifle an extension of her will. At last, she confronted Shade face to face in the heart of the factory. He drew a combat knife, smiling coldly. "You've caused me a lot of trouble, Carter." "And you've caused me more," she replied, her voice ice. They clashed in a brutal hand-to-hand fight, every move honed by years of training and raw survival instinct. Shade was strong and fast, but Emily was faster, fueled by a fierce determination born of loss and loyalty. At the critical moment, she disarmed him and drove him to the ground, pinning him with his own blade at his throat. "Cipher ends with you," she said. Shade sneered. "You think killing me will stop it? There's always another." Emily's grip tightened. "Then I'll hunt them all." With a final, decisive motion, she ended it. Outside, Jack staggered toward her as the remaining enemies scattered. "Is it done?" he gasped. Emily nodded, her chest heaving. "It's done for now." As they limped back to the jeep under the first light of dawn, Emily looked toward the horizon. Cipher wasn't finished, but neither was she. They had struck a blow tonight, and she would keep striking until every shadow was driven into the light. For the first time since her brother's death, she felt a glimmer of peace. She had honored his memory not just by fighting, but by leading others to fight beside her. And she would keep leading no matter how dark the path became. The end.